Yeah. So we touched on the reservation. You have a fascinating backstory. You go by the Grounded Athlete on Twitter.
Yeah.
And the reason why we get really excited with certain episodes of the podcast is we love to dig deep into topics that we don't know a tremendous amount about. And grounding is one of those things where I know it's really good for you. I do it every once in a while, probably not as consistent as I should be, but you by all accounts are the grounding guru. So I think what would be amazing is just learning a little bit more about your backstory, how you got into grounding. And I think we just take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in a Lakota culture, South Dakota on my reservation. So I've always kind of been ingrained with that earth-centric culture. Like the earth is sacred. It's going to heal you. And I was always told that growing up, and I didn't really think too much of that. When my elders would tell me that, my mom, my uncles would tell me that. And it wasn't until 20 years later when I went to school, undergrad, I studied physics, went to undergrad, I went to graduate school. And I kind of started to put things together when I found out about grounding on a podcast. I had come to grounding through athletics, through track and field. I was looking for ways to recover better, just to be a better performer, be the best that I could be. And I'd heard about this grounding thing, and I was very, very skeptical at first. I was like, oh, I take my shoes off and all these things are going to happen. I don't know about that, but I tried it. I started implementing it in my life. I started grounding before I went to bed, as soon as I woke up in the middle of the day when I started to get tired on my lunch breaks. And I noticed immediately my energy levels were so much better. My recovery was so much better. I was performing so much better. My injuries were occurring less often. I was like, okay, these things are happening. There's something going on here. And so I started to look into it. I started to, beyond the performance side of things, I was like, wow, this has so much to offer people beyond that. And from there, I just kind of became obsessed with it for the last, 6 years. I've been obsessed with this topic. And I decided to start the Grounded Athlete. And the Grounded Athlete was basically my way of condensing this information and making it digestible for people. So that's what I've been doing for the last 4.5 years since I started the Grounded Athlete, I started off making these long format videos, like these 15-minute videos, basically telling people how this is affecting a certain process in your body. And from there, that's what I've been doing for the past 4.5 years with this. So
it's interesting that you come at it from like the performance lens, because you see a lot of it on Twitter. I don't really see grounding on like any other social platform really, but I think that's where I came across it first. And it is one of those things where you're skeptical the first time you hear it. I'm curious how you kind of figured out or like measured the improvements that you saw from grounding, or like what was like the light bulb moment where it was like, this is actually working?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't gathering data by any means. I felt I was sleeping better. I was getting deeper sleep. And I guess how I was gauging it was how I felt the next day after a really, really hard workout that I'd grounded before and after. I was like, I felt amazing the next day. Like I could repeat the workout that I did yesterday, because usually when I finish like a really hard, intense session, the next day I'm wrecked. Like I'm not gonna be able to do anything because I could barely move. And then that was one of the first things I noticed when I started grounding like consistently. I was like, oh, I feel so good the next day. Like something's going on here. So that was, I would say, one of the big things that how I was gauging, what was going on here. But my sleep was so much better. My recovery was so much better. And then just overall my energy, because usually I would get like a 2-3 p.m. like crash during the middle of the day. Back when I had a full-time job, I was using my lunch breaks to just spend 30-40 minutes outside, just barefoot. I was like, oh my gosh, my energy levels are insane right now. Usually I'd be wanting to take a nap or something during that time. But and there's so many other things beyond the performance side of things, but that's definitely what got me into it initially. So